I mean, it's a really fun hole to fall down, but some of it's intense and kind of insane to read about, especially Zeus. That mother.
Oh my god. The mother doesn't begin to cover what he does. I think Zeus. The thing what most people don't know is that Poseidon has more children. I think he has almost as many children as Zeus. No one Poseidon gets underestimated too much for how much sex he has.
Yes,
So many
okay,
children.
but Zeus is just all the things that he's done are way worse than anything Poseidon. Like, I don't care how many kids Poseidon has. He's not as insane as Zeus. They're not comparable at all.
No, it's just I'm just saying the amount of kids. Everything else I didn't say. Also, the fact is Poseidon isn't married. Well, he is, but he's not married to the queen of the heavens. So that makes what Zeus does much worse because Hera is much stronger than Poseidon's wife, and Poseidon's wife, I think was it one of the Naiads, is not nearly as stressful as having the queen of heavens on your back.
Honestly, why doesn't Hera just smite Zeus? Like, I would. Like, man, he's not a good husband. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Saberbs podcast. If you don't remember, I'm Sam, and I'm here today with a new friend.
Hi, I guess that's my cue. I'm Kush. I'm 19, and I'm studying computer science like a proper nerd at City University of Hong Kong, where all the nerds go in Asian colleges.
So today's topic is kind of different from all the other stuff we've done, but today we were just going to be talking about Greek myths and sort of just very, very nerdy, but we're going to be talking about a lot of, like, not Greek myths, but mythology and just a lot of stories and, like, the gods and the stories of the gods in different mythologies. And I have a sort of general interest in this, as most people do. Most of my interest in it is more of, like, the goddesses and the lesser known goddesses, so that is what I'm going to be talking about mostly. Kush?
I'm every stereotypical kid. Percy Jackson. Pretty sure there's going to be at least 50 people who read about Percy Jackson. That's where I got my start too. And that's been majorly most of my research. At least that's where I started. That's how I got started with Greek myths. And from then on, hey, everyone knows Magnus Chase and The Kane Chronicles came out. Did more research after that. Got some books from Neil Gaiman too. He's a very good author. And just kept reading. Honestly, mythology gets so fucked up you can't look away, but it's so horrible that you have to just keep on reading. You can't stop. And that's where we are now. I've lost all sense of finding my way out of this mythology hole. Yeah, there are a couple like lesser known Greek stories that don't get talked about enough. I think one of my favorite is the story of Psyche. She's a girl who was supposed to be amazingly beautiful, more beautiful than Aphrodite. And if anyone's more beautiful than Aphrodite hates them because that's just how she is. She's just that girl, you know. She's just that jealous. So one day, Aphrodite, she sends Eros, or her son, Cupid, as a Roman one would know it, as the Roman version is, to kill, to make Psyche fall in love with something terrible and horrible and ruin her life. You know, the casual Aphrodite stuff. But he can't do it. He can't do it, and instead, there's a weird thing where Psyche's father goes and goes to the Oracle of Delphi and gets a prophecy. And eventually, Psyche has to jump off a cliff. It's a long story that's not really relevant. And when she jumps off, Eros rescues her secretly and takes her to a secret mansion in a valley where she's hidden away. And she doesn't know who took her away. It's like a classic Beauty and the Beast. Actually, this is part of the inspiration for Beauty and the Beast. She lives in a castle, and it's beautiful. There's lots of riches. She doesn't know who's brought her here. And there's all these talking instruments and everything serving her every need.
That's so sus.
Yeah, it starts
so
like this.
Suspicious.
And every night, Eros visits her, and she doesn't know who she is and who he is. Because if she knows who he is, then it's like a major ping that Aphrodite will pick up, that Eros has been recognized somehow. So if that happens, obviously Eros is in trouble, and so is Psyche. But one night, she gets tempted by her sisters, and she looks on him with you know those like old lamps where like there's oil and thing. So one of the oil drops falls on Eros, and Eros, a lot of things happen, and Eros basically gets in a way super seriously wounded, which is not supposed to happen to an immortal with a drop of oil. And Psyche loses her lover, and she was very happy there apparently, according to stories. So yeah, her happiness vanishes away. Eros has to fly off to Aphrodite's house, and
What?
that's not the end of the tale. You would think that ends there with every Greek story, but it gets worse.
Of course it does.
Yeah, so like so you got the Beauty and the Beast out. Now it's time for like the three tasks to the three, the normal like, oh, do these three things to get your redemption or
Yeah,
whatever.
there's always like there's always like a certain number of tasks for redemption, all that stuff, the typical mythology stuff. It's like redeem yourself or like prove yourself or like prove that you're a hero and you're deserving of praise by completing these physically impossible tasks.
At some point, you just gotta wonder, do they have like a committee when they decide the stuff? Like, okay, so you're gonna give
Yes,
him these
the
tasks.
committee's
I'm
name
gonna
is
reserve these
Zeus.
other tasks for my heroes. Yeah?
No, I said the
Oh yeah,
committee's
so
name is
Psyche. So Psyche, I can't pronounce her name properly. Okay, it's hard.
Psyche.
She goes to visit Aphrodite because she misses Eros, and she knew Eros would go there. So Aphrodite obviously is in the huff and puff, wants to kill her. And when Psyche walks in her door after Aphrodite's been looking for her so long, she almost kills her, but she stops at the end because killing a woman is not very nice, especially one who's come. And Psyche happens to be pregnant by Eros, so that's not really nice. Instead, she gives her a list of three impossible tasks. At least it was three at the start, but it comes four later on, which is we'll get to it. And her first task is to sort every grain in Aphrodite's great granary. And so Demeter helps her out doing this. So Psyche, she accomplishes first task with the help of Demeter. The second task is, oh no, what was the second task?
The second task, it says that the second task was to gather wool from a notoriously dangerous sheep.
Oh. Okay, yeah. The second task is Aphrodite, like every goddess, she needs wool. I don't know what she uses wool for, but she does. So, and these sheep. These particular sheep will have golden like wool, and these sheep also kill people and eat everything alive. They're not like normal sheep. They're not very nice. And Greek mythology has lots of animals like that. So Psyche goes there, but she's stopped by a helpful bucket of reeds sent by Hera, who talk to Psyche and tell her that eventually the sheep are gonna go chill by these bushes and use a thorn to, like they they get itchy, so they scratch themselves with using the thorn, and they leave their wool behind. So the reeds tell Psyche to wait for the day to get late or something, and the sheep to go there and itch themselves out, get their wool, and come back. So she does that, and Aphrodite is getting stumped more and more. She sends her the third task. The third task is to get water from the top of a waterfall, and this waterfall isn't like normal waterfalls. It's one of the head rivers with this river Styx, which flows into the underworld. It's also impossible for a mortal human. It's not very easy for a mortal human pregnant woman to climb. So that's one thing. And the second thing is the water needs to be collected from the top of the waterfall. And if it isn't, she'll know. If it's not cold when the water comes back, she'll also know. But Zeus helps her out at this time. But the reason Zeus helps her out is because Eros is the one who actually calls on him. Eros doesn't know about this at start, like Psyche's getting abused by Aphrodite doing all these tasks, but he hears her on her second task when she comes back. One thing that most people don't know about Eros is that all the gods fear him. He's a monster because he can do whatever he wants and he can make Zeus fall in love with a car if cars existed then. Like, those things you see about people who fall in love with a pole, or they fall in love with a car or a penguin or some weird thing like that. Canonically,
oh my God, that's the greatest description of Eros' power. He could make Zeus fall in love with a car if cars existed.
So the original prophecy that the Oracle of Delphi gave Psyche's father was that Psyche would be consumed basically by a monster that all the gods feared. And that's what Eros is. That's why people fear him, because he can do whatever he wants. He can make you fall in love with that, right? So nobody wants to be on the bad side of that. He calls on Zeus to send an eagle that Psyche meets the eagle. The eagle's like, "Yo, hit me up, fam. Give me your picture. I'm gonna fly to the top, fill up the water, and give it back down to you." She does that, and Psyche then meets Aphrodite, and Aphrodite's son, like, she can't believe it. 3 tasks. She's a pregnant woman, and she's doing all of these things. Like, if you think about it, like, I said these stories in, like, what, a span of, like, 5 minutes, right? For Psyche, she's been wandering for months. She had a peaceful life living with Eros. She had a good life there. Everything was perfect. And then it wasn't, right? And then she's wandering around the world. She's pregnant. She's homeless. She's nothing to her name. Nobody knows her. And she's just wandering around the entire land of Greece while Aphrodite's looking for her. This takes months. She comes across temples, cleans them. She does, like, her thing. And eventually she gets to Aphrodite. She does all these tasks. All these tasks take time. So she's been doing this for months. And Aphrodite's been abusing her. And this takes a lot of strength, honestly. That it's like she doesn't get talked about for someone who isn't like going around killing monsters or doing anything.
She was,
but her
yeah,
strength.
She went through a lot of.
Yeah, it's like it's not as cool as killing Medusa, Baby Bay, or the common stories of Hercules and his 12 tasks.
Yeah.
So she gets underrated.
Yeah, no,
exactly.
I think it's, like kind of this was sort of. I guess you could sort of say this was also her showing her, like, devotion to Eros, because she was doing this just because Aphrodite was like, I'm going to kill you unless you do this. Like, you can't be with Eros unless you do this. So it was sort of like a devotion thing. Also, you've made me come to the conclusion that the major gods suck. Like, they all suck. They're all
mostly
assholes.
do. Wait. See, this is where Aphrodite, like, she can't believe it. Like, she's done all this for Eros, right? And obviously, she sucks. You know her 4th task, okay? So far, she's had to sort through grain, which she got help from Demeter. She's had to get wool from some sheep, which she got help from Hera. And then the last one was the headwater of a waterfall, okay? He's, like, semi-human, and she got help from Eros. So Aphrodite is done, okay, so far. So she said her 4th task is to get beauty cream from Persephone, the goddess of the underworld. She's sending a pregnant woman who's not had good sleep, good anything, for the past like 6-7 months to the underworld to ask something of Persephone. That, I mean, I can't begin to understand. Like, the weirdest thing is she does it. She goes to the underworld, and on the way there, she crosses by a tower. Okay, and this tower gets possessed by the spirit of Eros, as we know it, but she doesn't necessarily at the time. And there's a couple things that Eros warns her about. You're not supposed to talk to anything or be stopped by anything on the way to the underworld. You know, like, oh, don't look back, don't get distracted, all those things. If you do, something's bad's gonna happen. Yeah, like the story
of what's it called, Eurydice and Orpheus. It's
and
like
Orpheus,
he has to be in the front, she has to be in the back, and they can't look at each other, sort of thing. There's very strict rules in the underworld for some reason.
Yeah, when God sends you there with with their trap in mind, usually. So
I'd just like to point out, there are more rules in the underworld than there are in Mount Olympus, because everyone up there is and killing all the time.
They're not. Honestly, Mount Olympus, for you think they would be more centered or more wise, but for like, they're just like spoiled children. They really are just spoiled children who can do whatever they want to. Like, Zeus does whatever he wants. As long as you don't piss off Zeus, you're mostly in the fine. Like, that's okay. But if you piss off Zeus, the strongest god, then things get a bit intense.
Yes, but anyway.
Anyway, so on the way to the underworld, okay, she has a bunch of interactions, but she doesn't look back. The funniest thing that happens is that there's an old man with an ass. And the ass here is a donkey, okay? And the donkey is carrying an ass load of something. I don't remember what it is. It's just something, and the ass man asks her for help. He asks her help, and I think asking the way out. Psyche is a good person, right? She's a good person. She would normally you could say and help, but this man and his ass are very suspicious people. So she has like all these interactions on the way.
Please just call it a donkey. Please just call it a donkey. I can't handle this.
What?
Please just call it a donkey. I can't handle this.
No, I can't. It's required.
All right.
According to the ancient text, it was called an ass.
Okay.
This is her first challenge, okay? This is just one of her many challenges on the way to the underworld. Her second challenge is, while crossing the river Styx, there's an old man, apparently, who wants her help to cross the river. But she normally would help again, but she doesn't. All these things are basically distractions done by Aphrodite, but Psyche doesn't fall for any of these because she knows, like Eros told her earlier. And eventually, she gets to the head honcho of all of things underworld, like on the guards of the gate, Cerberus, three-headed dog, casual stuff. Having someone who's been going around eventually having to face Cerberus is just too much. But she's a smart woman, so the way to get around Cerberus, like a lot of heroes do crazy stuff, like kill Cerberus or kidnap him or things like that. But Psyche just feeds him a bunch of rice and like basically a barley cake, and she gets around Cerberus. That's it. Just feed the three-headed dog, guardian of the underworld, a cake, and you'll be fine. She
Hey,
makes her way
all
through all
dogs,
these.
all dogs are the same. You give them food, and they will let you do whatever you want.
Yeah, I mean that's why. Like, how are guard dogs even effective? Jeez, she's giving food.
Even with
Just
three
to,
heads.
like, I just want to like. It's so easy to make it sound so simple, but like, imagine if you were facing a three-headed guard dog of the underworld who's gigantic, but he falls for barley cakes. I don't know what's wrong with dogs. She makes her way through all of this. Fields of purgatory. She sees all the souls just chilling there, being sad and depressed, having nothing done with their life and things. And she makes her way to Persephone and asks her for a beauty cream. Like, this woman has been through so much, and she gets the beauty cream from Persephone. If once she mentions that it's it's for Aphrodite. The thing is, Persephone doesn't really put beauty cream because gods are little children. Instead of helping this world and leaving her out of it, she puts this thing called Sigyn sleep or something. Horrible for people. It'll mess up a god's day, but it won't like kill them, obviously. But it'll basically kill a human being. On the way back from the underworld, she makes it through all these challenges. Like, it's been months. She knows this is the end. Okay, this is the last task. After this, she can see Eros. But she's in terrible condition. She's worn out. Her clothes are ragged. She's nothing to her name. Basically, for someone who's supposed to be so beautiful, she can piss off Aphrodite. She's feeling insecure. Okay, and it's not hard to believe that. But after all this, she's feeling insecure about her beauty. So she loses her self confidence and she opens the box meant for Aphrodite, the beauty cream, and she gets hit with the Stygian sleep and she almost dies basically. Just because she got insecure about her looks on the way to meeting Eros. The story would have ended there, but Eros, somehow, he knew that Psyche was dying in his house. That his metaphorical wound that was digging into his shoulder was getting more and more painful. And Eros makes Aphrodite rescue Psyche and bring her back. Once Eros sees the body, he takes her body and flies all the way to Mount Olympus and makes the gods basically like he's done a lot of favor for the gods. Gods are scared of him. He makes them make Psyche a god. So she managed to cover all that and she becomes the goddess of human spirit of hope, because she's just been through so much and she just not I don't think it was hope, I think it was just the human spirit and compassionate basically. After all of
That's
this, yeah.
I think her name is the origin of why we call like somebody's like essence or like energy or like their spirit, like in humans and like in psychology we call it your psyche. She's the
Yeah.
reason why. That's the etymology of the word, is from the Greek myth.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool connection.
Yeah.
It's like the goddess of basically human soul, compassion, and all those things. After all she's been through, she gets to become a god and live happily ever after. She's basically one of the only few happy endings in Greek mythology. Literally everyone has a bad ending.
Or multiple bad endings. If Zeus is involved, everybody's just. Can you tell? I have beef with Zeus.
Yeah, just you go mano a mano against Zeus, the god of the Greek.
On the topic of gods that Zeus is afraid of, I would like to talk about a lesser known goddess in Greek myth, the goddess of the night, Nyx, spelled Nyx, not Knicks like the New York Knicks basketball team. She is a primordial god. She is one of the strongest gods. She's one of the oldest gods. She's the daughter of chaos. So she was created towards the beginning of time and the beginning of the universe. And she's so powerful. She's the only goddess that Zeus is actually afraid of.
Yeah, she's one of the really old ones.
Yes,
There's only very few gods that were alive back then.
Yes. She was basically, she's the daughter of Chaos. And she was born on Gaia, which is also the motherly god of the earth, or like just the motherly god of like existence. And she lived in what's it called? Oh, sorry, I need to look at my notes. I don't know what it says. Oh my god.
Tartarus, right? She lives in Tartarus.
Yeah, she lived in Tartarus, which is the god of like, not really the underworld. It's like the god of like, sort of like an underworld, the like primordial version of the underworld. She lived on like that goddess's like existence, like realm of existence. Cause
like the underworld, the underworld kind of thing. Like so
yeah, it was like it was like the pre-Olympian version of the underworld. So it's like before Hades, before Persephone, before the Titans, the major Titans that we know about today. She lived in the underworld, her version of the underworld, the first version of the underworld that was sort of helped in the full creation of the universe. And she was born on what would have been the precursor to Earth, Gaia. And she's the daughter of Chaos, who's basically like the beginning of the universe, because there's like chaos and peace. She's never been a major figurehead in Greek mythology, despite the fact that she's one, extremely powerful and like one of the oldest existing goddesses, and she's just cool because she's the goddess of the night. She's often represented as like the moon and the stars, and just like our general idea of what space is what the Greeks would have used to represent her presence. She's sort of like, I would say she's like the goddess of space because they often associate her with like stars and like the moon. She's just such an interesting character to me because there's not like any major myths about her. She's more of just literally like a figure that existed during creation, and a figure who was so like, not mysterious, but she was just, her aura and her personification in myth was so powerful that even Zeus, the great god that he was, was afraid of her. She's extremely powerful. She's, but it's just, her influence over humanity, during the creation of humanity, and even within, like, the society of, like, when humans were existing as the other major god, like, with the other major gods already, like the Titans and all of those, like, major figureheads that we all know. She had a strong influence over the gods because of her control over night and day. Because her daughter she gave birth to Hemera, who's the goddess of day, and as the goddess of night, her and her daughter were the opposites of each other. Hemera would chase away the darkness, the mists of darkness, to form day. And then at night, the shadow and mist of night would sort of encompass the world, and she would take over. And it was a sort of balance between night and day. That's also why we have night and day in the human. This is like the Greek myth. That's the origin of the concept of night and day. Like, right? Her husband is Erebus, who's the god of darkness. And they had, which is kind of ironic because they ended up having two children: Hemera, the goddess of day, and Aether, the god or goddess. I actually didn't look because
Erebus is also another name for the underworld, right? Like the normal underworld.
Yeah, Erebus is also another term for the underworld. I think he's the precursor to Hades' underworld also. There's like three versions of the underworld. There's like the primordial underworld, and then like the after primordial underworld, and then like Hades underworld, and then like Hades and Persephone underworld. There's too many underworlds.
I think it's like Greek myths. They're very by old Greek men at the time. They've been translated, everything.
They're very interconnected, but scattered. You know?
Yeah, in a way. Probably why there's no stories of Nyx. Like none of the Greek writers would write about Nyx. It's just probably so scared of her, just don't know anything about her because it's so
She's
old.
The stories that do exist of her, they personify her as very mysterious and very dark, despite the fact that they never really portray her as evil, obviously. Because I've said there's no really stories about her like there are about like the birth of Aphrodite or like everything Zeus has ever done. I really like bringing up Zeus because I love to roast him. Okay, this is just a Zeus roast
very
session.
Complicated god. Mostly he's bad. He's supposed to be the one that keeps the kings in line. His job is to like visit kings, see if they offer proper hospitality to people, and if they're good people and things like that. And if they're not, Zeus would punish you. That's why you're supposed to like treat every traveler well, give them hospitality and things like that. But if Zeus is in charge of that, I don't know how he has the time to do any of that while he's going around screwing a lot of women, basically.
This is why any god who sought assistance from Nyx, like any of the other gods that sought assistance from Nyx, would be protected from Zeus because Zeus was so afraid of her. She was extreme. She's really the only goddess that Zeus was ever afraid of because of how powerful she was. She literally controlled like nighttime. She could literally like engulf the entire world in darkness if she wanted to, if Zeus tried to like step up to her. So she was extremely powerful. You don't step up to chaos. She's the daughter of chaos, which is sort of the root of all creation. So it makes sense why she's sort of also she wasn't considered okay. The stories that they do have of her, or like the sort of remnants of what they know about the like stories of her, she wasn't a bringer of chaos, but she did have a very strong influence. I said before, she has a very strong influence over humanity, but it was never good or evil. It was just a very strong, like whatever she wanted, she could influence humanity to do. But most often her imagery was associated with like darkness. She was always like clouded in like shadow or something like that. She was associated with the moon. She was associated with the stars. It was always nighttime and darkness. Those are the three main, like nighttime, darkness, and like the slight glimmers of light in darkness were the three major images of her, like three major images used to represent her. But, like, her symbolism is often associated with just nighttime, darkness, and one of the major ones is, like, the moon, because the moonstone is a major thing used to sort of honor Nyx as the goddess of the night, because it's, like, they absorb power. Like, a moonstone absorbs the power from the moon. It's used to sort of offer, like, energy, at your energy and devotion to Nyx. You sort of, like, bring a moonstone, and it's, like, you're protected but from like chaos and whatever with like from if you sort of offer her the energy of a moonstone. Yeah. She's like I just love like there's no stories about her, so I don't obviously like can't really read much about her, but I just love the whole entire concept of like her as a goddess, because it's just an interesting thing. She's never been, like, a major figurehead of, like, you know, there's, like, the cult of Dionysus, there's, like, the people who worship Aphrodite, all that stuff. She's never been a major figurehead, despite how powerful she is and how, like, cool her story is and just look like her everything. She's just, like, it's so interesting to me that she's always been considered a secondary sort of goddess and never, like, a primary god that somebody would want to worship, because, like, come on, man!
I think it's just because, like, a lot of times when you associate things like darkness and you would associate, like, darkness with evil, but, like, Nyx isn't evil or good. It's just, it's like a force of nature in a way.
Yeah,
and a lot of times, like, good and evil get, like, it's not, this isn't applied to things like forces of nature. They just are what they are.
Yeah, but she created the fates, she created, like, the spirits of sleep, she created death. So, obviously, there is some... she created, like, the spirits of strife and pain. She created, like, a lot of the major things that we associate with, like, sorrow and sadness. All of those
that probably doesn't
sort
help
of
her
negative...
case to become good.
The negative, sort of the negative figures and, like, emotions and personifications of, like, emotions and negative events. But, come on, man! She's so badass! She's so cool! Like...
She's scary, basically.
That's
probably why. She's like, scary, too.
Because, like...
She's cool, but scary, come on.
Yes, Zeus was a very, very powerful god, and also an asshole. This was the only goddess he was afraid of. Is that not enough of a reason to love her? She was, like, so mysterious and scary that Zeus himself was afraid of her. This is just a Zeus roast session, okay? I'm just
Yeah,
gonna roast
would also
Zeus
be
this
scared of
entire
Gaia too. Nyx is there's probably like a very few gods that Zeus would be scared of, and Nyx is definitely one of them, but not the only one. I'm pretty sure there are other gods too. Like
But she
they're
was the
really
one
old
he
ones,
was
like of them.
mostly. She was the one he was afraid of the most because I think in terms of like her powers, because she has control of night. She created death. She created pain. She created the fates. So
Three
she's
fates are volatile.
yeah. She created a lot of the very powerful, like sort of negative energy that was like put onto the earth. So she's great. She's fantastic. Not fantastic, but she's so interesting.
Fantastic.
I think she's
Interesting is
fantastic because
really
I like think she's interesting. I've always been super interested in like Nyx as like a goddess because every time I hear about like the thing, it's always the same information, obviously, because there's no like set stories about her like there was for Psyche. But it's just she's such an like the concept of like her story and like just everything about her is just so interesting.
I think it's just like a lot of times like stories don't involve monster killing, things like that. Things like Nyx, Psyche, they gotta put to the sidelines. I really love Psyche's story just because how difficult it is and how rare it is. That it's something that Nyx just gets overlooked. Just because she's such a force of nature that just everyone's too scared of her or something. I don't know why
That
they
makes
did certain
sense.
things about
I
her.
mean, it would make sense
knows?
if the only reason why there's not that many myths of her is because people were afraid of writing her stories wrong. Like, they were afraid of making mistakes in interpreting her stories that they would be, like, smited by the spirits of night. I completely understand if there's no stories of her because the people who wrote these stories were so afraid that they would be, like, consumed by the night and, like, the spirits of death would come for them. So I don't blame them, but like, it's just so interesting. I'm gonna keep saying that. She's just
You know what's so funny? Is that can you imagine a family dinner with Nyx, Erebus, Hemera, and Aether, just having just like night, day, mist, and was it the underworld just sitting at the family table? Can you imagine the conversation? Would you ask like, oh, how was your day, sweetie? To like Hemera, I don't know.
How was your day? How was your night?
Just like starts into a family argument, and then between night and mist, and then just parents just watch. Man, that'd be something.
Yeah.
And having immortal parents and immortal family arguments, things like that.
The gods are just chaotic.
The god, yeah, I just. It's so. Can you, if you were an immortal being with basically unlimited power, would you still pretend? Would you still do what's right, or would you just do what they want? What you want? Like that's why the gods do what they want. They're not necessarily right or wrong. They just do what they want in a way.
Clearly, they got lost in the sauce.
Okay. Lost in the sauce. I don't know if ancient Greek had that kind of sauce. I'm not sure what kind of sauce you're talking. A lot of times, I guess. I don't know what sauce you're talking about here, fam, but I get
The
it.
sauce is power, Kush. They get lost in the trappings of power and immortality. They think they can do whatever they want, and they do whatever they want. You know, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
who's gonna go to a god and tell though? That's why like Greek
me.
myths are just
Come
all
on,
about
come
gods
on.
f***ing up, and it's the heroes doing stuff or something. Everything's just a tragedy. Because when you have immortal beings, they don't care as much about humans, and humans just like
That's
get
true.
the short end of the stick.
that's very true.
Short end of the stick. There's a funny story. There's not a funny story. There's a tragedy about a prince called Meleager, who was one of the he was almost in a relationship with Atlanta, but when he was a young boy, the three fates came to Meleager's mom and they gave him a stick of firewood, and they said if this stick of firewood burns out, Prince Meleager will die. Can you imagine your life being tied to a little stick of fire? Someone is playing a prank on people. I swear. They're literally just playing
like,
a prank at people at this point.
This long. When this burns
Yeah,
out,
yeah, like,
you die.
and then they go to the next one. It's like, oh, hey, for you, let's see what we got. We got if you read this, if someone like, let's see, what could be if someone kills this thing or something, you die. And the fates are just going around doing these kind of people. And Prince Meleager, he thinks he's invincible because like no one would ever touch his log that his mother got protected at home. So Atlanta comes, she kills this boar, and there's a fight over the skin of the boar. Meleager backs her up over the other hunters, and eventually one of the two hunters offends Atlanta, and Meleager has to basically kill them. They did an offense, yada yada. Meleager was technically in the right, but those were his uncle and brother. So Meleager's mom, horrified by what Meleager did, burns the stick of firewood, and he dies. Literally turns to ash. And Atlanta runs away from the kingdom. I, it just. Immortals are just messing around, fam. Immortals is literally just messing around. Stick of firewood, yeah, that'll be a fun one.
Greek myth is crazy. Like obviously the presence of like Greek myth it expands beyond just like Greek mythology, because obviously in Shakespeare there's a lot of references to like sort of the gods and stuff. I know that in the Scottish play there's the witches, right? There's the witches in the Scottish play. And they do there is a mention of another goddess, Hecate, who is the goddess of witchcraft, and it's basically like the three witches sort of answer to her. The goddess Hecate is the goddess of witchcraft and magic. She's also the goddess.
Crossroads, right? I heard.
Yeah, she is the goddess of crossroads, which is what I was gonna say. Which is why it's okay. It's good. It's good. It actually works. In a lot of the artwork that they do of her, in a lot of like the statues they do of her, in a lot of the like images that are produced of her, she has three faces. So it's one facing forward, one facing left, and right. Because of her. Because she's also majorly considered the goddess of the crossroads, which is why also like in some other forms of mythology, sort of crossroads and magics are sort of a major connected to each other. But she is possibly the child of Perses, the god of destruction, and Asteria, the goddess of oracles and prophecies. But there's no, like, I've seen also a lot of other things of, like, who her possible parents were, but the most often story is Perses and Asteria. She didn't start off as a goddess. She was sort of, not mortal, but she was, like, not really a god. She gained her powers because
like a demigod-ish?
Yeah, she was kind of a demigod, even though she was the daughter of two gods, but they weren't really major gods either. She gained her powers because she fought on the side of the Titans during the major war of, like, the gods and all that stuff. And Zeus granted her powers for her role and, like, her assistance in helping the Titans in Olympus.
Oh, you mean the gods, right?
Yeah,
Wait.
the god, like, she helped the gods. And Zeus was like...
Okay.
She helped the gods, and Zeus was like, you can have these powers. You're, like, the god of magic now, and everything like that. So, yeah, she's closely associated, like, there's not that many stories about her, but one of the major stories is her holding two torches, to light the way to help Demeter when she was searching for Persephone, which is also why she's closely associated with Persephone, even though Persephone, Demeter, major goddesses. People know who they are. People have heard stories about them.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Hecate is strongly associated with both of those goddesses because she helped Demeter in her search for Persephone. And because she helped Demeter in her search for Persephone, she also became friends with Persephone, so they have a close association with each other, but there's not really much stories about either of them in myth. And it's also why one of the major symbols associated with her is two torches. She's often, other than the three-faced image, another image that they often do is her wielding two torches because of the story of Demeter, her assisting Demeter in searching for Persephone. So she's not a major god, but considering the gods all have like powers and stuff, I feel like she should be because she's the god of magic. Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, like strength-wise, like things she does is not very common. She's very extremely powerful because like torches, witchcraft, and things like that. She's also extremely old, and a lot of the old things in Greek mythology are very strong.
Yes,
One of
and she was granted her powers by Zeus. Zeus himself granted her like the ability, not the ability, but he granted her like the title of goddess. She had powers beforehand, but he was the one who's like, you can be the goddess of magic. So she's cool.
She was also the yeah. A lot of witches in Greek mythology, the most notable one being Medea, who ran away with Jason and also like stepmother of Theseus. She was one of the followers of Hecate. A lot of the witches in Greek mythology, like yeah, followers of Hecate. Medea, Medea was she was a witch who lived in what was it not Crete. I can't remember. It was at the eastern edge of the Greek world. She lived there in a place with that's extremely hard, difficult to pronounce, like college something, where she lived, and she ran away. And the Golden Fleece was also there. And when Jason came to take the Golden Fleece, Aphrodite made Medea fall in love with Jason, and she was at a crossroads. Right, she probably prayed to Hecate for some guidance on what to do on the crossroad of going with Jason and betraying everything she knows and loves because she's been cursed by Aphrodite to fall in love with Jason, probably through Eros. Or should she stay and, not do any of those things and support her father, King Aedes, in protecting the fleece and probably killing Jason and the Greeks? She probably prayed to Hecate then. She ends up going away with Jason and the Greeks and helping them get the fleece. But later on, when the love kind of wears off, Jason eventually divorces her, and she, using her powers, was it? She not necessarily using her power. She basically she kills her and Jason's kids, has a really sad ending, and then she becomes Theseus' stepmom. She's chased out of there too. Yeah, sorry, that was a side topic. Hecate, her followers probably not really well known other than media. As far as I haven't really encountered anyone any other stories of Hecate or anything relevant to her other than that and the Demeter thing.
Yeah, there's no major stories. There are stories about like the stories of her familiars, like the animal familiars, and like how they came to be. But those are like those aren't like major myth stories. They're sort of just origin stories of where they came from. One of them was like Heracles, the midwife of Heracles, the midwife who helped birth Heracles, sort of tricked his mother, and like enraged by that, the mother turned her into I think it was a oh god, I'm pretty sure it was a polecat. I don't know if this is the story of the polecat or the black dog, but Heracles' mother was enraged by, I think it was her. I'm definitely not getting the story right. Heracles' mother.
Okay, wait. Heracles' mother?
Yeah.
Wait. Oh, yeah. Okay, the human wife. Okay, I keep
yes.
For some reason, I was thinking of Zeus, but that's the dad.
Yeah, she got turned into a polecat. I think it was a polecat. Because she basically like tricked and manipulated Heracles' mother, and she like got mad about that, so she turned her into a polecat. And Hecate's like, "Hey, you want to be my animal familiar?" Because Hecate felt bad for her. So,
for a goddess of witchcraft and all this evil stuff, she's not exactly evil. She's actually pretty nice god when you look about
She's actually not personified as evil because, like, despite all the stuff that, like, despite all the imagery that's associated with her and, like, the god that she is and, like, all the stuff that she's associated with, she's, like, she's also, another, like, from the sources that I've read, she's also considered the goddess of, like, ghosts and spirits, necromancy, knowledge of herbs, and poisonous plants, which are all very, like, witchy stuff.
Very specific.
That's so specific.
Very specific witch traits.
Knowledge of herbs and poisonous plants, which is a very witchy subject. They could have just put, like, poisons and plants, but...
So, next time if I want to make poison, I know who to wish for.
Okay. Yeah?
One last story about roasting Zeus that you might want to...
Okay. One more story before we move on.
Okay. For one Norse mythology, one more story about roasting Zeus, okay? There was one major time where Zeus and the rest of the Olympians also showed up like little punk ass, and that was the story of Typhon. No clue who his parents were. There's some supposedly saying he was born of chaos, something. A lot of possible stories. But this giant ass monster was so tall, his head scraped the sky. He shoot fire, poison, broke islands. He was so big. He was bigger than the largest Olympian, and none of the gods could stand up to him. They tried, of course. They tried and failed. Zeus got his, those little muscle thingies that you keep, and they tell you not to tear them, those tendons and things like that.
Yeah, your tendons.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Typhon took those tendons out of Zeus, and Zeus got basically destroyed in that fight.
Deserved.
Huh?
Deserved. He
To
deserves
be fair,
it.
that was one story where Zeus wasn't acting like an asshole. The other Olympians were scared to face him, and Zeus was one of the only ones who did. And Zeus got punished for it really bad. Like, he's not gonna die, but he's in extreme pain, can't move, and he's just sitting there till he gets rescued. They put his tendons back, he gets his strength back, yada yada, killed Typhon. But you know what? That's not the point. The point is Zeus showed up, and I just wanted to tell you that that happened. That Zeus wasn't always all powerful.
Yeah, he's still a dick. Like,
He is mostly a dick. He's like
really
98%.
I love to make fun of Zeus. Okay, I love making fun of Zeus.
He's
It's just
very
fun.
easy to make fun of.
Yes.
Like, oh my god, literally everything ends with him. Anything that involves him most likely ends in suffering for the non-immortal side of the family, and everything involved him and him he just ends up looking like a dick mostly.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, moving on from Greek myth, we're going to be talking about
Let me just switch my books here real quick. So the Norse mythology on top, so I can
yeah. Okay, speaking of moving on from Greek mythology, we're going to be talking about Norse myth, and on the topic of like crazy stories, I think you should go first because mine sort of connects to yours, but I think yours is more gives more context to the story that I'm gonna tell. So, you have the floor.
Norse myths, like people know about Norse myths. Like you have MCU, Thor, Loki, all that, and just throw all that out. None of that is actually how mythology works. Thor was the son of Odin. Loki was not son of Odin. He was not stepson of Odin. Loki and Odin were blood brothers. Basically, like not blood brothers, like they were related. Blood brothers, as in the sense like they both shared blood and made promises, vows, unbreakable things like that. Yada yada. And Norse mythology is nothing like that. Thor isn't some charismatic, blonde hair, blue-eyed Crims Hemsworth. He was more like a extremely fat, muscular guy who burped a lot and was super strong. And
he's a bumbling oaf.
He's more like that, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Norse gods aren't anything like we see in the MCU. They're not like all these people. So you have to just remember that, keep that in mind. Like MCU ruined my perception of Norse mythology for a very long time. It was really hard to get it back.
No,
So
hey,
What?
hold on. Before you say, to be fair, I have been told that the only thing the MCU got right about Norse myth is that Loki is hot.
Oh my.
Come on. What did you expect?
Okay, you know what? That is true. Loki is hot. He's a shapeshifter. He can be whatever he wants to be. That's one of the powers of Loki. Not all gods can shapeshift like he can. So he is very hot. He does have a lot of children. His children also end up causing the end of the world. Loki also ends up getting Thor's hammer, which is a pretty long story. And he gives Odin a cool ass spear, and he gives Odin lots of gifts and other things. Loki's just, oh my god, he's just so much. He's the worst and the best god at the same time. He's just chaos. God of Trickster perfectly suits him. Anyway, okay, this is the best story of Loki I've ever heard, and it's my favorite one just because it's so hilarious. Also, slight NSFW warning. It's a bit
Graphic.
no,
Gory?
it's a bit more. It's a bit graphic in the sense that
It's a little bit gross.
You know what? We'll get.
It's a little gross.
We'll get. It's a little gross. I think that's the best way to put it. Okay. Okay, let me set the scene. So we got Asgard, okay? Realm of the gods, newly created, and the gods have many enemies, all the giants and everything. So Thor has a hammer that can kill any giant, right? That's cool. What are the rest of the gods gonna do? They're just gonna chill in Asgard and they're unsafe and undefended home? No, of course not. So do they do what everyone does at that time to defend themselves? They're gonna build a wall. But they need a wall so strong that no giant can breach it, nothing can get through it. And the gods, they're many things, but they're not master builders. So one day during this conundrum, this old, human-looking guy walks up with a horse, okay, to the gods, and makes them a promise that he'll build a wall so high and strong that no giant can climb it, no giant can break through it, so tight that no ant can slip through it. And he tells the gods that his only payment by the way, is going to be Freya, queen of the gods, also Thor's mother, not related to Frey by the way. And was it nothing? The sun and the moon, you know, the little things. So he just demands that. That was his payment. But the gods, with Loki makes a counter offer. That he convinces the gods instead of they can't possibly offer this up, right? The gods can't do that. So he makes them a counter offer, saying that if you finish it in 3 seasons, 1 winter, 1 summer, 1 winter, the gods will do this payment. And yeah, right. Instead of the original, like he proposes that I'll finish it in 2 years. They make a counter offer, finish it in shorter time, like 1.5 years, something like that, and we'll give you these things because the gods aren't going to offer these things up easily, right? So the god's plan was that he won't finish the wall in time, so basically that it's impossible, right? They'll get half a wall, and they won't have to give up their things, and the guy will be on his way because there's no way he can finish a wall in that short time. But then it starts, right? It starts. He starts building. He starts carrying these large ass bricks, and it's impossible for them to carry it. It's just he does all these things, and the wall begins building. His horse can pull out giant ass stones from the quarry, and it keeps on going on, and it's almost the end of the time, like a lot of time, and the gods are angry at Loki. Freya cannot. You can't lose Freya. You can't lose the sun. So the gods are pretty extremely pissed at Loki because Loki was the one who made the suggestion for this counteroffer, and time's almost up. He goes to the man and he's like, "Yo, how the are you doing this?" The dude's like, "I'm not gonna tell you shit. Why would I?" Sorry, obviously he doesn't talk like this, but I think you get the message.
Don't ask
So the
stupid
thing
questions,
is-
Loki.
Don't ask. So the thing is with this thing, this was no ordinary man. Obviously, no man could get enough stones. No man could carry enough stones or place enough stones to build a wall worthy of the gods. He was definitely a giant, and I'm pretty sure everyone would suspect by now. Because this wall was so strong, not even the gods could break it. This horse was so strong, he could pull so many of these giant ass blocks. And this man was clearly a master builder. So Loki, he obviously, if he didn't do this thing, Loki was probably just gonna, as gods would probably kill him and things like that. Loki didn't want. So he turned into horse, and he distracted the other horse, the horse that the guy was using to pull all his bricks. So he couldn't. If you have no bricks, how are you gonna finish the wall? And so one day, right, that horse sees Loki in horse form, and he chases over. Loki like calls to him. Whenever that horse gets close, Loki runs away, and eventually they're so far that none of them can hear the master builder when he whistles for his horse to come back. Okay, and he can't finish the wall. Time's up. The gods laugh at him, and this horse doesn't come back. Okay, none of the horses come back. We won't see Loki for a while now. And the meanwhile, the gods get angry at him. The master builder's like, "Bro, what the fuck? You broke your promise." And they said, "No, we didn't. We didn't interfere with you. We didn't do anything. Your horse left. That's not our fault. I mean, we didn't do anything." So he becomes giant form, tries to attack the gods. Not very smart. Thor happens to be back from his expedition at the right time, and he kills him. Whatever. And no one sees Loki for 9 months in the meanwhile. And eventually Loki comes back with a horse. So I'm just gonna let you guys fill in the blanks of how Loki and horse show up after 9 months. Sorry, with a baby horse. I just want to make it clear it's a baby horse, not
Eight-legged
the
baby
other horse from the master
Eight-legged
build.
baby horse. Eight-legged baby horse.
Yes, it was also 8-legged, and that horse became Odin's steed, official steed. And the other horse, I don't know where the other horse went, the master builder's horse. That's how the gods got their wall, and Loki gave birth to a horse. So, yeah.
Spoiler alert, he f***ed the horse.
Okay, you know what? If you were Loki, you put yourself in this situation. You got a giant room of angry gods who are about to kill you. The Vanir and the Aesir both don't like him at this point. The wall's about to be finished. She's about to destroy everything, right? The best solution you can think of, distract the horse. You know what distracts horses? Female horses. There's honestly no words. There's nothing that can make this normal, Sam. I understand. That's how I felt. And if anyone listening to this, feels a bit grossed out, I'm with you. Also, side note, if you feel grossed out by this, Arabic
more.
mythology is going to make it even worse. Do not read 1001 100 was it 101 nights or 1000 whatever. Do not read that book. I have read one chapter of that book and my eyes will never recover. Anyway, back to the topic.
Loki.
This-
The topic is Loki and how
topic is
chaotic
Loki.
he is. And
Yeah.
he's kind of the worst. He's kind of the worst.
Loki is very comic. Like he does things. He's like the hope and the cause of destruction of the gods at the same time. He got them his wall though. He got the gods their wall. All he did was almost lose the queen of the gods, the queen of the Aesir to be specific, which is Freya, and the sun and moon. He almost lost those in exchange for building the wall. Like he did give the gods the wall at the cost of just. But it's just like so much. Why? Why do you have to do this? Why do you have to subject us to it? Who wrote this down? Why would you write this down? So many questions.
Loki is a very complicated god. He is half the cause of sort of the end of the gods, like the story of everyone kind of knows the story
Yeah.
of Ragnarok, sort of, not the Marvel movie, the actual story of Ragnarok, which is like
No,
the
don't
end.
mention that movie like that to me. It's a good movie, but it's
Yes,
not Ragnarok.
it is. But the end of all, like the end of the gods and everything like that, everybody knows that it's kind of Loki's fault. There's sort of a bunch of events.
It is straight up Loki. It's not kind. It is straight up Loki's fault. Just say it, Sam. You know you want to say it. It's straight up Loki's fault.
Yeah, it is, but like his direct cause in it was sort of compounding events. You know?
It was because he
right?
was horny. Sam, come on.
I don't.
No, that the horse is not part of Ragnarok though. That horse is not
I
part
know,
of Ragnarok.
but I've
That's
still.
the only time he gave birth to something though. As far as we know of.
The fact that he gave birth to anything is cause for concern.
You know one thing that Norse mythology and Norse things have? It's more gender fluid. Like at least like Loki is. He's not
Because
exactly.
he's a shapeshifter.
Yeah, he's a shapeshifter, right? He's like, guy, girl, whatever in between. He does it all. Fly, horse. He'll do whatever he has to. Whatever he has to make sure he's not in trouble. And that's what he had to do in this case. Like Norse mythology is just more brutal, more grossy, more just
Yes.
everything. It's way different in tone to Greek mythology and their like epics and all this. Norse mythology stories are just more like
It's more
you know,
brutal.
like you imagine Vikings.
Yes.
They're
it's
not refined. They're more like
I like the concept of
warriors, I guess, like
Valhalla.
human.
You have to die in battle, or else you're gonna end up in hell. Like their version of hell.
Valhalla.
So.
It's so funny that hell is just called hell without an L, like Hel instead of Hell.
Also, Hel is Loki's daughter.
Daughter of Loki.
The goddess of the underworld, guys.
Okay, you know what? Let's just properly, in case you don't know, Loki betrays his wife, who you're gonna get to in a minute, I bet, and goes to Jotunheim, which is the realm of the giants. Hooks up with a giantess called Angrboda. God knows how to pronounce that name. And he gives birth to 3 children. One of them is the Fenrir wolf, who looks like a normal wolf at first, except he talks, and he's also very smart. And he also becomes so giant that he eats the sun and Odin. So, that's that thing's fate. The second one is Jormungandr, who's a giant-ass serpent, so big he can circle the entire Earth, and he is the cause of Thor's death in Ragnarok. And Thor also kills him at the same time. He's the world serpent. Do not want to mess with him. Extremely large, super blah blah. The third daughter is Hel, who's the goddess of the underworld. What kind of god gives birth to something that kills 2 of the most prominent gods in Norse mythology? Odin dies to one of Loki's children, and so does Thor. And Hel is just, goddess of the underworld. And he betrays his wife while he does it, because he's so hot that everyone wants to hook up with him, apparently.
Yes, but on the topic of Loki's wife, Sigyn, that's actually how it's pronounced. I had to Google it to make sure I pronounced it right yesterday.
That's better than what I've done.
She is considered the Norse goddess of fidelity and sort of the goddess of loyalty, because she is known for her devotion and loyalty to Loki despite everything he did and everything he did to her, because he kind of sucks if you haven't noticed. she was
He's fun, though.
she was extremely loyal to him, and she never but unlike in Greek myth, like Hera was kind of also a piece of Sigyn she never had any ill intent towards anybody. She never did wrong to anybody. She is the goddess of fidelity because she was extremely devoted to Loki. One of the major stories of Sigyn is that she stayed by Loki's side when he was being punished for the death of Balder. He was forced to sort of sit under they killed his wolf son and used his organs to bind him in a cave. And bind him in a cave, and then they had a snake like hanging over his face, dripping venom onto him, and Sigyn stayed by his side and said that she would hold a bowl over his head to stop the poison from falling and like burning him. But on occasion, obviously bowls are not endless, so she occasionally would have to leave to empty the bowl, and in that time some of the venom would drop onto Loki's face, and despite the fact that he would yell at her, he would get angry at her, he would like he would insult her because of her inability to do what she was promising to do, even though bowls are not endless, as I just said. Okay. She still stayed with him, and she still like would go back and hold it until the bowl was full again, leave empty, and it's just a cycle of this.
Can I just say, why didn't she figure out a better method than a bowl, first of all? And second of all, I heard
What do you want her to do? A bucket? She's gonna have to empty it eventually.
No, you might as well just set up like some sort of slide or something that directly goes to the ground. Yeah, I also heard a story that Loki screaming when Sigyn let the poison fall his face, like caused earthquakes or something.
Yeah, because of how powerful he was, like as a god. It's said that his screams and like cries when Sigyn would leave to empty the bowl are what caused earthquakes on Midgard, aka Earth. That's most of the time when there were earthquakes, it usually meant Sigyn was emptying the bowl. That's kind of an interesting take on it. I find that that's cool. But
just get something better than bowl.
Despite everything, prior to this whole event with the snake in the cave, and being bound by his wolf son's organs,
wow.
Sigyn and Loki did have two fairly normal children. Like, these are the only normal children Loki had. The names were Vali and Narfi, and they were mostly normal. They weren't some form of animal or god. They were normal. But as punishment for what he did, he was forced to kill his children. But despite everything he did, Sigyn, who should not have been loyal to him, continued to be loyal to him and was extremely devoted to him. And based on actual history and like the stuff that she's done, there's evidence that the Norse people, the Scandinavians or whatever, they honored her. They honored her as the goddess of fidelity, nurturing, and grieving. And she was honored primarily by women who would make specific offerings depending on which version of her they were like trying to pray to. So there was the young bride version, which was mostly for like younger, like it was like the virgin goddess. There was the grieving mother, and then there was the nurturing mother, and there was sort of a method to honoring her depending on which version of her they were praying to. But she's a very not underrated, but she's a goddess that not a lot of people talk about in Norse mythology, but because all of her story revolves around Loki and her devotion to him and her loyalty to him. Yeah. She shouldn't have been. I really disagree. She should not have been as loyal and devoted to him as she was. But her story is still like extremely important, especially considering that she seems to have had an important role in the actual society of the Nordic people, because there was obviously a lot of evidence that they very much worshipped her in terms of like as like a mother figure and like a nurturing figure. So
That kind of reminds me of like how Norse mythology feels so much different than Greek mythology. It's because how it's more brutal and more real,
Yeah.
more tough. No one is really immortal. You can't recover from everything. People do die. Gods die. And someone like Sigyn, like, what her, she's more like, it's not like Hera where it's like little kids running around. It's real. I don't know, Norse mythology just feels more real when things like that happen. Stygian being so loyal to Loki
Yeah.
during all of this. Like, she wasn't, okay? Look, the poison dripped on Loki's face. That would be different Ragnarok and different story
Yeah.
then.
yeah. Yeah, they said also one of the things with the earthquakes were sort of a precursor to Ragnarok, because that's why Loki's kind of the cause of all issues in Norse mythology.
He's also the solution
Let's
of,
just-
like, every issue but one. And that one issue is also the destruction of the gods.
Yeah.
Loki, like,
Yeah.
Loki got Thor his hammer, he got Odin his thing. He does so much, but he also destroys everything. Like, so much. It's just complicated, like, everything he does. Everything then was so brutal and so exchanged. Like, you made promises, everything had value and things like that. It's not like Greek mythology, it's so wishy-washy kind of thing. So Loki's betrayal and everything. Ragnarok, how it's the end of everything, right? Ragnarok's where everyone dies and everything dies, and the last combatants on Ragnarok are supposed to be Loki and Heimdall. Loki and Heimdall is the watchman of the guards, and he's not supposed to be black. I don't know if he's black or not. It's an MCU thing, whatever. Anyway, I thought that was Norse. Anyway, so Heimdall and Loki fight. They fight as the last combatants on a battlefield that's 300 miles wide. Thousands of millions have died here. Gods have died. The armies of Valhalla have died. The armies of the dead have died. There's nothing left. Just Heimdall and Loki. And eventually, they both hit a mortal blow on each other, and they both die. And as they die, Loki says they succeeded. It's the end of everything. But Heimdall, he's the watchman of the gods. He can see everywhere. He can see farther than Loki can. And it's not the end. The part of Ragnarok that people miss out a lot is that Ragnarok's not the end. It's the new beginning. So the thing is, everything dies.
It's a reset.
Yeah, it's a reset.
It's a reset.
Like, couple things don't die. You mentioned the death of Balder. Balder stays in hell till Ragnarok. After Ragnarok, Balder comes out and he becomes the new head of the gods. Thor's two sons,
He is
Magni and
reborn.
Modi, they survive and they both will wield Thor's hammer. Two humans survive hidden in the Yggdrasil or the World Tree, and they'll be now the new Midgard. They'll spawn new humans. So like, Ragnarok's not all bad. It's like a reset. It's a new beginning. There's things move forward, and it's. I don't know why there's no stories post Ragnarok, but that's where Norse mythology usually ends. And I think I like Ragnarok because like, there's hope. There's always a new beginning. It's not the end. No, I like that a lot. So many fun stories.
Yeah,
So
okay.
many unknown stories. So many horny stories. So many gory stories. So many
Horny
happy
stories.
stories too. Actually, not so many happy stories.
The Zeus roast session. The Zeus and Loki roast
Oh
session.
my. So many. Hey, you know what? I will find more gods for you to roast. There's so many nice stories too, like so many underrated stories.
I also kind of roasted Hera because I
my God,
roasted
roasted
Hera
Hera.
and Sigyn because I was like, y'all need to
Hera
get
deserves a
better
roast.
husbands.
Hera deserves a roast. She's not exactly a very nice mother. She's very far from a very nice mother.
True. Okay. Anyway, speaking of the end, this is the end of this episode. It might be really long. It might be this episode might be really long because me and Kush love to ramble and talk about Greek myth because we're both very nerdy and very, very into talking about lesser known stories and myth. I hope you guys enjoyed this this episode of the Saberbs podcast. Me and Kush were probably rambling for a really long time, so sorry to Carlos who has to edit this. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed listening to us talk about Greek myth. Maybe we'll do another Greek myth and Norse myth. Maybe we'll do another episode of this talking about other myths and other lesser known gods and stories. But anyway, yeah. Bye. Anything you need to say?
I just want to say, Hope y'all enjoyed, and I hope you guys enjoy the stories. It's all about the stories, fam. It's not about what the stories are. It's about how they make you feel, and I hope they don't make you feel horny like Zeus. That's all I want to end it as. That's. Don't give birth to
Oh my
horses.
God.
Don't talk to strange animals, and don't look back if you're in the underworld.
All right. And on that note, bye
Bye bye.
bye.